Please join me in welcoming UAW Vice President Cindy Estrada.
That song is "We're Not Gonna Take It." It's one of my favorite songs when we organize. But I want to thank all of you for inviting me today. I want to thank Mike and the whole executive board. I had the opportunity to meet Mike a few years back when Steve Wyatt, who many of you know works with me in the UAW, introduced me to Mike and said that you have to have this guy speak at your conference, that he has a vision. And it was a time when we were trying to bring a lot of different people in the room to help auto workers see, and workers in the UAW, that none of us are going to figure out this alone, that we got to unite and come together. And so Mike came to that conference, I think during a very busy time, I'm sure, in your union, and it was clear that he had a vision. And it was clear that he was looking to how, not only to get the message out for utility workers, but then how we partner together on things that we share. And I think that shows by yesterday's Women Caucus. It was incredibly impressive. I have the women's department in the UAW as one of my assignments, and it's clear when he had brought everyone in the room, not just women, but men and women, we're never going to be able to have women issues out there unless we have men together fighting together with us, and to have the vision to bring everyone together yesterday to do that is incredibly important. I know that I wouldn't be where I'm at if it weren't for both men and women in the UAW and in my life. So thank you, Mike, for your leadership, and thanks for having me. You know, I was coming here, and often when I'm going different places or speaking to our membership, I always have my kids on my mind. I have 12-year-old twin boys. They're probably a little more on my mind this morning because they're on summer break, and they probably called me 6 times this morning asking me why I wasn't home. And but they're on my mind because I often think, what kind of world are they going to go into? What kind of world are they going to create and grow up in? And it certainly, I can see in my 46 years that it's not the world that I grew up in. And so I think of, that there's 2 different visions in this country right now, very different than when I grew up. There's this vision of hate and division, and there's this other vision, I think, that we represent in this room, of hope. But I really believe that vision of hate, we're really in the very struggle, as this morning's invocation, for the struggle of our soul of this country. And, and we see it in this vision of hate and fear, and it makes me think of my kids. What kind of world are they going to create? What kind of values are they going to hold? And when you look at this vision of hate, I was reading an article the other day, and this was incredible to me. By 2016, the 1% are going to own 52% of the global wealth. Think about that. 1% by 2016 will own 52% of the global wealth. That means 80 people, this is an Oxfam article, 80 people right now are worth $1.9 trillion. That's this part of the room, you're worth $1.9 trillion. And so I think about what that means for us if we don't grow our soul and change the direction of this country. At 52%, owning 52% of the wealth, that means they control democracy, not just here in the United States, but globally. When you think about some of the other things because of that's happening in this country, it used to be that privatization was another way, right, for big corporations to make money, because it's not that, making 360 times that of the average worker is not enough. The CEOs that I sit across from the table, fighting over whether or not a worker should come down $11 from their $14 or $15 when they make 23 and 24 million. But when they come after our children, think about it. They've privatized everything, so now they want to privatize our schools because they can make a buck off of school children. That's when we got to say enough is enough. In Michigan the other day, the legislature passed a bill that said that kids who are truant, too much. And what does that word mean? We should, look it up. It has all kinds of vilification of children, that if they're truant, then the rest of the family will lose food stamps. Now, we all know that poverty creates a lot of issues for why kids can't come to school. Sometimes it's mental health issues, sometimes it's food issues, sometimes it's transportation issues, sometimes it's just too damn dangerous to walk to school. But they're going to take food stamps away from the whole family if you're, I think it's 6 years old to 16. To put that kind of pressure on a child, to me, is when we have to say enough is enough. When you think about 50% of our children today are on food stamps in the public school system, 50% are going to school hungry. And in GM, they talk about, well, we want to figure out STEM. I'm like, you don't figure out STEM until you figure out how you have a child in a room that's ready and prepared to learn. And you think about in my sector, in auto parts, not in assembly, because a lot of people, how many of you think, auto jobs, those are good jobs, right? Assembly workers, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, they make good money. But the truth is that 80% of that car is built in the auto supplier sector. And the average wage there is like 10, some as low as 9 we're seeing in the South. So literally, manufacturing, we did a study, it said 9 out of 10 Americans believe manufacturing is going to rebuild the middle class. What people don't know, that they're not good jobs. Those jobs are not going to rebuild the middle class. In fact, workers are working full-time, walking out the door into a food stamp line. We're subsidizing as taxpayers those manufacturing jobs coming into the state as the legislature gets together. Then we're subsidizing again. When they walk out of work, we're paying for the food stamps. And these same corporations, 10, 11 million the CEO makes a year, 23 million, 24 million, 46 million is what they're making, but we're subsidizing their workforce. I think that's when we say enough is enough. If you want to have a job in this country, if you want subsidies, then you have to pay enough for your workers to be able to raise their family and put food on the table and children not walk into food stamp lines. And but what's really scary about it is then, and we all see this, I'm sure you see it in your membership just like we do, then they vilify the poor. Right? Then it becomes the vilification of these people on food stamps. No one's talking about the fact that they're working full time, or the vilification of children who don't have enough to eat. I mean, I have a son, I hope no one's videotaping this, and if you do, don't put it. He has some anxiety issues. He's 12 years old. It is a fight every day for him to walk into school. But I have resources. I have doctors that help him. I have the right food that I feed him sometimes, not so much this summer. But I have resources, and it is stressful as a parent to parent my child. And some days I come home from work, stressed from him, and I'm not such a, how many of you yell at your kids and say, God, I can't believe I just did that? I know you all should raise your hand, because something we don't talk. Could you imagine what it's like to be a mother who's working full-time for $7 and $8 an hour? Coming home, still not having enough to feed your children, the stress that causes. But they don't want us to look at that. Instead, they want us to vilify the parent or the child. And it's like the perfect organizing campaign. I was an organizer the most of my career in the UAW, and it was funny. Workers would call us because they had really bad issues, not just wages, but it was a respect thing. People were, not being respected in the plant, and they would call us. 80% of the workers would sign up. They all wanted the union. And then through the anti-union campaign, we'd end up losing 3-1. Now, how does it happen that everybody's calling? Nothing was solved. It's not like the employer solved the issues, but then we lost. Where we won is where this didn't happen. We didn't allow them to divide us. The workers on the shop floor kept it together. They didn't allow the company to pit first shift against second shift. They didn't allow the company to pit black against white or immigrant against non-immigrant. They didn't let skilled trades get pitted against production workers. And they kept it together. They remembered why they called the union in the first place, and they kept it together. When the company tried to divide them, they kept it together. But that's not what's happening in our country today, and that's what we have to change as a labor movement, along with other progressive organizations. Look at immigration. How many people have had a debate on immigration in this room? Some of you may be on the side of, on the opposite side of me of it. We're debating immigration and whether workers should be here, but we're forgetting that those same workers who are coming here aren't coming here because they want to leave their country. They're coming here because they're being screwed by the same corporations that are screwing all of us. Excuse me, is that a bad word? No. Okay. But we forget that. We forget what we have in common with that immigrant worker, and then the fight becomes whether they should be here or not. I got to tell you, as a woman raising 2 kids along with my husband, and I love these boys. They drive me nuts, but I love them. If I didn't have food to feed them, I would come here illegally. And I want to ask you guys, how many of you would, if it was a choice between helping your child eat or not, how many would you take that risk? I think all of us would when it came to our kids or our grandkids. And that's what we got to not forget and not let them vilify us. Ferguson, how many had debates over Ferguson when that happened? Right or wrong, whatever happened on that issue, that was an issue of a community not having good jobs. But what did they want it to make it? A black or white issue. Because if we're talking about a black or white issue, we're not talking about the real issue. That kids are going to school in poverty, that there's not good jobs in the community. Instead, that 80 people who own $1.9 trillion have us fighting over a black and white issue. That 80 people who own $1.9 trillion have us fighting over immigration. In Detroit right now, the big fight is water. Right? Infrastructure. The jobs that you should be creating and doing, that you do so well for our country, they're not allowing it to happen. Instead, they're saying, you know what? You worker who don't have a job because there's no jobs available, or you have a job working full-time and the CEO's making 370 times that what you make, and you have to walk into a food stamp line, we're going to shut your water off because water is not a right. Now, they don't want to look at the fact that every abandoned house in Detroit has a leaky faucet, no one's even there. They don't want to look at the fact that all the corporations in the city of Detroit haven't paid their water bill and that there's a serious infrastructure problem. Instead, you know what they're saying? There's river. If you want water, go get it. Some of our own members, right, are fighting over whether or not it should be based on affordability, right? We're getting caught up in this fight over water, vilifying the poor instead of looking at the real infrastructure problem and the fact that the taxes, that the money is going to the wealthy and not supporting the community. When I say we're fighting for the soul of our country, we're fighting for that. When did it become a debate whether or not a child has water? When did it become a debate whether a child goes to school hungry? So those are the kinds of things that I think, we represent in this room. In Detroit, it's booming. You can't get an apartment in Detroit or a hotel room. People are moving in there like crazy. But if you go to the outskirts of it, where water is being turned off, where people are living with abandoned homes, where kids are faced with violence going to school, that's what's not being talked about, and that's what we can't let continue to happen. And so I would say that that's not the vision that I want for my children or any of us want for our children. I want the vision of hope and compassion, of growing our soul, of reminding ourselves that in the end of the day, most people who get angry about immigrants or get angry about poor people, it's really because they're afraid. Because they're afraid. We all want the same thing for our children. We want to be able to provide for them. We want them to go to college if they want to. We want to be able to go on a vacation. We want to be able to make a decent living. So how do we get back to, across unions, across progressive movements, where we start to remember what we have in common and not let them divide us, not let them take the focus off what's happening in this country, but to stay focused on how do we build a world where everyone can make it. And not make it because they're getting charity, but making it because they're afforded a good job, a good public school. And so I'm excited about that vision because I think for the first time in our country, people are feeling uncomfortable about income inequality. People are feeling uncomfortable if they have it and somebody else doesn't. Not enough, but I think with the work that we're all doing together and how we partner together in the future, we're going to be able to promote that vision of hope, the vision of compassion, the vision of love. And I think that is going to be, more than anything, what we're going to be tasked to do so that we can change this country. And I have faith. I see it every day. I see workers standing out on their streets who have good jobs, supporting people who don't, and not letting them shut the water off. I've watched our members stand in front of homes and turn police away and turn cars away from stopping a house from being foreclosed. That gives me hope. We have unions coming together that normally don't work together, trying to, inviting each other to talk and speak to our membership to see what it is that we have in common. So I just really appreciate being able to be here. I appreciate the invitation. I look forward to working with all of you because enough is enough in this country, and I know that together we can make this a better country for our children and our grandchildren. So thank you.